So you've gone and got yourself one of these shiny white helmets, the Meta Quest 2, and you're ready to shun reality, which, let's face it, is bloody rubbish anyway, for a tasty bit of VR action. Only problem is, the Meta Quest store is packed to the tits with all kinds of games, from action and adventure titles to head-scratching puzzlers and some seriously brown trouser time horror games. And very few of them could actually be considered cheap, so you don't want to waste your precious cash on an absolute dud. So what actually are the very best MetaQuest games you can bag yourself right now as we hit the arse end of 2022? Well, I've been testing out dozens and dozens over the past 2 or 3 years, and here's my absolute top favourite VR titles. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So undoubtedly one of the greatest Oculus Quest games right now is Resident Evil 4 VR, a straight up port of the classic action game that puts you right in the beefcake body of Leon S. Kennedy as he shoots angry Europeans in the face over and over and over again. Of course, Resident Evil 4 has been ported to pretty much every console ever in existence. I'm pretty sure you can even play it on a pocket calculator these days, and for good reason too, because it is proper mint. From the opening assault on the village to the cack your pants session with a giant lake gribbly thing, Resident Evil 4 is one of the most entertaining games ever designed. In first person, that combat feels even more fluid as well as more personal, and thankfully I didn't feel motion sickness at all, despite constantly dodging all over the place, avoiding flying axes and those chainsaw dickheads. It is a real shame though that cutscenes and cutaways, basically anything where you're not in direct control of Leon, still play out as a boring 2D movie, and it's particularly jarring when, for instance, you knock down a ladder and you're instantly pulled out of Leon's body, you watch the ladder falling down in 2D and then you're back into the action. It's, yeah, very bizarre. But that and a couple of minor gripes aside, this VR port works really well, and it's well worth a playthrough even if you've done the original game to death. Now, if you're in the mood for some more light-hearted VR fare, well, definitely check out I Expect You to Die 2, which is unsurprisingly the sequel to I Expect You to Die, which, by the way, if you haven't played either of these games, some of the best fun you can have with one of these things strapped to your bonce. This tongue-in-cheek adventure slaps you in the sexy tux of a secret agent and thrusts you into various perilous, far-fetched situations. You'll need all of your wits to solve the many puzzles and escape each scenario unharmed, so don't go down in too many martinis first. With its tongue-in-cheek humour, clever mind twisters and impressive interactivity, I Expect You to Die and I Expect You to Die 2 are just absolutely bloody delightful, although also pretty damn short. Now, I absolutely adore the PlayStation Spiderman games, and I've always hoped that they would make the jump to VR, but while we're waiting for that to maybe eventually happen, well, definitely check out Resist on the Quest 2. This mission-driven adventure game has you swinging around a virtual city just like the Webbed Wonder, except here you've got a couple of guns to blow away any bothersome enemies. I was actually quite surprised that I didn't immediately want to hurl my guts up while launching myself around this shiny and surprisingly massive city, but the devs have chucked in quite a variety of control methods and comfort-based options, so you're bound to find something that works for you. Just dicking about soaring from one end of the place to another is fun enough once you get used to the controls, that is, but you've also got a number of missions to complete tied together with a typically hokey comic book style plot. And the further you progress, the beefier you'll become, thanks to an upgrade system similar to the aforementioned Spider-Man games. Overall, it's pretty cracking stuff, and certainly the only VR game about swinging that is worth a go. Now, if you're up for adorable platformer type shenanigans, then Lucky's Tale is another must try. Like Astrobot on the PSVR, this has you controlling that titular big-eyed fox thing as he leaps about several colourful wee environments, murdering all of the local wildlife and generally making himself a bit of a nuisance. There's not much of a story here, admittedly something about your pig getting swiped by a bug-eyed tentacle thing, but that doesn't really matter. What's important is that the platforming is an absolute bloody joy, as long as you can handle some occasionally tricky, well-timed jumps in a 3D space. Like Astrobot, the difficulty level is just about challenging enough for adults to enjoy, helped along by the added time trials and coin collection challenges, but younger gamers should be able to make it through without too much trouble. Likewise, VR platforming fans should definitely check out the Moss games, which star an adorable wee mousie as she runs around lushly detailed environments, twatting robo-bugs with her tiny sword. Gameplay mostly involves tinkering with each mini level to open up the exit, which you'll do by directly guiding Quill the mouse around using the left thumbstick, as well as grabbing and yanking things with your own disembodied hands. It's an intuitive setup, albeit one with occasionally mildly irritating platformy moments. Every so often you'll find yourself battling a bunch of bugs with your sword, which helps to break up some of the puzzling shenanigans and inject a bit of excitement. The difficulty level is low, but Moss is still great fun, and the sequel, Book 2, is a direct continuation of the story, so if you crave more of the same, then fill your boots. Anyway, let's shift back from cutie cartoon characters to nasty, gory, gritty, zombie-filled VR nightmares with the rather excellent Walking Dead Saints and Sinners. This melancholic post-apocalyptic tale that has civilization plunged into chaos and humans turning against their own kind in horrifying fashion could easily be mistaken for real life these days, but it's actually a pretty smart first-person survival adventure. From your base, which is inexplicably a bus parked up in a graveyard, you'll find yourself piecing together clues to find a legendary bunker, filled with enough supplies to last a lifetime. All the while you'll need to scavenge for food, bandages, weapons and materials that you can strip down and use to craft more useful items. The real joy of Saints and Sinners is that tense exploration. You'll need to creep cautiously through the skeletal remains of civilization, either sneaking by the shuffling dead or ending their misery with a brutal selection of melee and ranged weapons. The stealth mechanics are solid, and going one-on-one with a zombie and a shiv never gets old. You can't just poke that rusty blade into the head with a pathetic wee jab, you need to properly swing it into their skull and penetrate that brain to put their lights out proper. Not enough force and you just end up grappling with a seriously miffed off corpse. It's suitably groovy and it's bloody amazing. And tension is ramped up even further because you are working against the clock. If your wristwatch goes into the red, that means the bells are going to toll and the Walking Dead are going to flood the streets, which is about as much fun as being in blue water on a Saturday afternoon. And if the sound of that really basted your Christmas spuds, we'll definitely check out Arizona Sunshine as well. Yes, it is yet another first-person zombie survival shootery thingy with very similar mechanics indeed, but it is also a classic and it's been spruced up for the Oculus Quest 2. The plot is a little light, but like The Walking Dead, this first-person adventure really makes you feel like you're lost in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. Once again, you'll be foraging for resources while putting brain-munching buggers out of their misery, but there's more emphasis on action here, and capping an undead fiend from 30 yards with a jizz-tastic headshot never gets old. Arizona Sunshine's puzzles are admittedly easy even for a boozed-up northerner, mostly involving finding a key or pushing a button. But when you have dozens of zombies closing in on you with only a few bullets to spare, it is a proper thrill ride. Those visuals, which were already pretty stunning, have been given a bit of spit and polish for the Oculus Quest 2, and the physics seem improved as well, so now those zombies behave in an even more naturalistic manner, at least as natural as a walking stiff could ever behave. If you happen to be more of a fan of dinosaurs rather than rotten, reanimated corpses, well, Jurassic World Aftermath is definitely worth some of your time. Aftermath has you exploring the infamous island after things went a bit wrong and those dinos got all bitey, but you're not here on your hauls. Rather, you have to evade those pesky raptors while trying to escape with all your bits intact. Besides the ravenous raptors, there's a bunch of simple puzzles to tackle, and exploring the ruined halls is a lot of fun, even if interaction is depressingly limited. And despite the colourful cartoon graphics, those dino encounters are proper pants shredding, so thank the baby Jesus you got lots of convenient lockers scattered about the place to cower inside of. Horror fans with bowels of concrete who want to further destroy what remains of their Y-fronts should also check out Exorcist Legion VR, which offers up several episodes of absolute heart-stopping terror. And the new Twilight Zone VR game is kind of interesting enough to warrant a look if you see it really cheap, but it does feel quite rushed and a little bit simplistic. Now, one of the most impressive new titles to hit the MetaQuest is Bonelab, a rejiggered version of Boneworks, which mostly runs well on this standalone shiny helmet. Those graphics have been scaled back somewhat from the Steam VR version, and occasionally the frame rate drops when things get a bit mental. But this is still a hilariously enjoyable sandbox title which gifts you with all manner of weaponry and allows you to get all medieval on a host of hapless enemies. Now, every object in the game has a realistic kind of weight to it, so if you find yourself wielding a mighty axe or a massive f***off sledgehammer, it can feel pretty awkward until you get the hang of it. You'll encounter simple puzzles that can be solved any way you see fit, as well as endless baddies to club, slice and blast into virtual chunks. And the devs have even chucked in a selection of mini-games to keep you busy and help you learn the controls, which can certainly feel quite fiddly at times. The plot's a bit threadbare and it's plenty janky, but Bonelab is still an absolutely wild time, so get it got! Another great Oculus Quest game that's been updated for the MetaQuest 2 is Trover Saves the Universe. This action platformer is from the diseased yet brilliant mind of Justin Roiland, one of the sick puppies behind Rick and Morty, and that potty-mouthed eccentric humour is well and truly ingrained in Trover, which sees you floating about in a chair while guiding a purple sweary thing through all manner of levels,
twatting things and generally getting up to mischief. It's simple stuff, but it's so batshit mental and funny that it is well worth picking up.
Now, if you're after an immersive sim that'll really test your mental faculties and it's absolutely gorgeous to boot, well, one of my favourites on the Meta Quest 2 right now is Red Matter. This acclaimed sci-fi adventure has you exploring a spookily deserted space base, brainiacing your way through environmental puzzles while figuring out what the ruddy heck happened to all the previous inhabitants. You'll be pulling levers, tweaking knobs and fiddling with machinery to progress deeper into the base's bowels, helped along by an incredibly useful scanner which can translate any Russian text, and also tell you what stuff actually is before you muck about with it. The second Red Matter is a direct continuation of the story and basically more of the same. Gorgeous graphics, impressive interactivity, and a thick, ominous atmosphere that'll keep you on edge throughout. These games are a fantastic showcase for the MetaQuest's abilities, although they're also most definitely deliberately paced, slow burn adventures that won't be to all tastes. So if you're more into fast, frantic action with stuff constantly flying at your face, then maybe check out Pistol Whip instead.
This is basically an on-rails shooter where your sole purpose is to pick off every bugger what pops up from behind the scenery. Every level is set to a different song and you get bonus points for plugging your foes in time to the beat, so it's kind of like an ultra-violent version of Just Dance. In this 2089 update, a proper campaign mode has been bunged in alongside the original levels, and to be honest, the campaign's plot is about as meaty as a vegan sausage roll, but who cares? It's basically more levels for free, huzzah! And to jazz things up, the campaign also features fresh enemy models, some cool new weapons, and twists on the original gameplay. The best thing about Pistol Whip is that it makes you feel like a proper badass, even if you're just a bald middle-aged dickhead pouncing about in his living room. Those funky digital style visuals reminded me a lot of Super Hot, and they help to keep the game child-friendly as well. Even though you're plugging literally dozens and dozens of people with guns, there's not so much as a splash of blood or a kidney flying against the nearest wall. And yes, speaking of Super Hot, that is another oldie but goodie. The hook here is that enemies move only when you do, so at any point you can just freeze and plan out your next move. Should I grab this guy's gun and blast him in the face, or maybe just take him down with a well-aimed pool ball to the nads? The world is your violent oyster. Heads up though, you will need a good bit of free space to play it, as you'll actually have to move around ducking and dodging and uppercutting some dude's junk and what have you. Any Star Wars fans out there are well serviced by the good old Oculus Quest 2 as well, and you'll probably sploosh yourself silly at Tales from Galaxy's Edge, which is absolutely stuffed full of fan service. You play as a simple droid repair technician whose mission is to salvage some valuable cargo that you just jettisoned. You'll spend most of your time exploring the lush planet of Batu and blasting holes in unfriendly gang members who are after your precious booty. Although your enemies are about as clever as a box of Pop-Tarts, that combat is still good fun. You'll feel pretty badass dual-wielding blasters, and I really like how you can chuck your old weapons when they're spent and grab pistols from fallen foes. It is a shame that Tales from Galaxy's Edge is rather on the short side, like quite a lot of VR adventures to be perfectly honest, but at least there is a bit of unlockable bonus content that is very different from the standard main gameplay.
And the Vader's Quest trilogy will also probably delight fans, but any casual dippers into the Star Wars lore probably won't find much to hold their attention here beyond the occasional bit of hot lightsaber action.
And let's face it, who doesn't enjoy wanging around a massive glowing sword? And last up for the action games, I'm still a big fan of Robo Recall, a fun and fast-paced arcade title that has you blasting and slapping rogue robots into tiny metal chunks. It's simple, but it's highly addictive carnage and definitely an essential purchase for Oculus Quest 2. Now, one of the most addictive games that I played recently on the Meta Quest is Walkabout Mini Golf, which is exactly what you'd expect it to be. Several rounds of crazy golf shenanigans to suit putters of all ages and abilities. Holes range from your usual fare with rocks and tunnels to absolutely mental efforts that you'd never actually see on a real-life course, taking full advantage of the VR escapades. There's a hardcore version of each course to tackle once you're confident enough, missing balls to find dotted about the place, and basically hours of absolute joy thanks to the realistic physics and stellar design work. Now next up, one of the most infamous and best-selling adventure titles of all time has been given a fresh lease of life here on the Oculus Quest 2 as well. I'm talking of course about Myst, which like Resident Evil has already been re-released God knows how many times, but all the same I still get a thrill wandering through those familiar worlds in VR. It's still as tough as a rhino's arse, and the puzzle randomizer feature means that even veterans won't breeze through it. My only complaint is that taking notes while you're playing the game is a wee bit awkward, basically involving taking off the headset, making a note, putting it back on and such forth. Some sort of automatic note-taking tool in-game would have been really bloody helpful, but hopefully that'll be implemented in some future patch. But all the same, anyone who loves a good puzzle, especially a good super tough puzzle that'll have you smacking your head off the nearest wall until everything goes pleasantly numb, should definitely get involved. And any adventure game fans out there should also get a kick out of A Fisherman's Tale, which is certainly one of the more unique and innovative titles available for this sleek white helmet. This time around, you play as a wooden puppet who lives in a lighthouse, naturally, and who also spends his spare time working on a small wooden replica of his homestead. But one day, when you lift the roof off, you discover a tiny version of yourself in there. And not just that, but your own home's roof appears to have lifted off, and now an enormous you is looming overhead. Thus begins an absolute mindfuck of an adventure where you basically have to solve puzzles by passing items between big you and little you in order to manipulate your environment. And yes, I realise I'm making about as much sense as I usually do after 10 pints of bitter, but really it's one of those games you just have to play and experience for yourself. It is a work of pure genius, and getting through will take some proper lateral thinking, as well as some thorough exploration and perhaps a healthy dose of illicit substances. Factor in the surprisingly emotional story and that slick presentation, and this is one of my favourite all-time titles for the Oculus Quest 2.
Another VR mindbender that's well worth picking up is the Last Clockwinder, which sees you striving to save an ancient clockwork tree with the help of magical robot cloning gloves. And yes, that sentence does make it sound like I'm basically on all of the drugs, but hang on a second, let me explain. What you'll essentially be doing in this game is harvesting fruit. Lots and lots of fruit. But you can't do this single-handed. Instead, push a button on your controller and then record yourself performing an action like plucking fruit and tossing it merrily into a collection barrel. Push the button again and poof, up pops a robot slave who'll happily repeat that exact action over and over for the rest of time. At first you'll be trying to set up the most efficient Robo Labs possible, but as you unlock more rooms with more complex requirements, you'll find that these robots must work together with perfect timing to get any kind of result. Thankfully you can immediately scrap any robot that has gone a little bit wrong, and chances are that's something you'll be doing hundreds of bloody times before you finally see this game's end. There is a sweet little story running through the Last Clockwinder, which is gradually revealed via conveniently scattered tape recorders, the kind of shit that game developers just can't get enough of. But even without that, this is one of the most engrossing and addictive VR puzzlers out there.
And lots of love also goes to Room VR, a dark matter which has been built from the ground up for virtual reality, although it does work in much the same way as those mobile games. A dark matter casts you as a London detective in the early 20th century, and your objective is to find out what happened to a missing archaeologist who just mysteriously vanished. To do that, you'll have to trace his final steps and figure out a bunch of sometimes ridiculously intricate puzzle boxes, prodding buttons and twisting knobs until you manage to unlock the secrets. Being able to lean in and closely examine each object from every angle definitely makes a dark matter even more immersive, while you once again have a selection of supernatural lenses that can transform your surroundings with eerie results. Fireproof Games has really made the most of this platform. The Room VR looks stunning and plays beautifully, sucking you in from the very first moments and keeping you gripped. Be warned though, it's also tougher than a week-old chicken nugget, so if you turn off that built-in hint system, well, get ready for some serious brain ache. Now, another brilliant recent addition to the Oculus Store, and one for any survival fans out there, is A Song in the Smoke. This challenging title has you crafting tools, foraging for food, and fighting off beasties as you search for 3 purple glowing rocks for reasons. And this is hardcore stuff. There's not a Primark in sight, so you'll have to skin animals to clothe yourself and build campfires at night to ward away the horrible gribblies that lurk in the darkness. It's very tough stuff and definitely not for the weak of heart, especially with the limited number of saves in each stage, so only true hardcore survivalists should apply. Now, if you're missing going down to the gym to burn off all of those Christmas mince pies and port, well, there is some relief to be had in Fit XR, a very worthy VR exercise app that started as a boxing sim type thing, but now it's expanded to include even more workout types. The sweat-inducing boxing sessions have you smacking 10 bells out of floaty orb things as they hurtle towards your face. Definitely a very enjoyable virtual workout with a range of difficulty levels and a decent variety of hip-hop, rock, dance and pop tunes to get you punching to the beat. And that has now expanded to include HIIT training and dance sessions as well, so you've got a good bit of variety of stuff on there. Although it is a subscription-based service, you will have to spunk up £7 a month in order to get involved.
If you'd rather not pay a monthly subscription, then I also highly recommend Les Mills Body Combat. A one-off fee grants you access to dozens of intense workouts that really engage every muscle in your body. And by engage, I mean absolutely punish until you're basically a sweaty, flabby puddle of human flesh. You've got more varied moves compared with Fit XR, while the trainers do a great job of keeping you motivated, even if they do make the same annoying joke about drinking tea in a crap British accent over and over and over.
And you'll also get a decent workout from Audica, a highly satisfying Oculus Quest rhythm-based game which has you dual-wielding pistols and blasting fast-moving targets to the beat of a pumping dance soundtrack. On the more advanced levels, you'll need instant reactions to clear everything zipping by, while modifiers such as invisible guns make life considerably more difficult. I've also got to give big love to Synth Riders, an excellent rhythm game that has you fist pumping all over to punch coloured balls before they smack you in the gob. There's a great selection of tunes to bop along to, including dance, dubstep, rock, and even some swing. And I've got even more love for Smash Drums, a title that leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. All you gotta do is pummel supernatural floating skins as they drift towards you, keeping to the beat while pulling off a good bit of proper flair every now and then. Absolutely banging.
So that right there is my pick of the very best VR games you can grab yourself for the Meta Quest 2 right now. But have I missed out your own personal favourites? Definitely clue me in down below. These games are of course focusing on the single player experience rather than the multiplayer one. I am hoping to do a co-op / multiplayer version of this video at some point, but frankly I suck at games, so I really wouldn't hold your breath. Anyway, that's enough from me. For more on the latest and greatest tech, please do poke, subscribe and ding that notifications bell. I'm off to bugger off into virtual reality.